Theo. It's April 7th and we're still in quarantine. It was really fun to watch your video. I'm glad that you got to be in a hot tub. That sounds fun. Yeah, I can't wait to see you. I can't wait to like see everyone and like just be back out into the world. I like sort of didn't even realize how much I like being outside and doing things and going to places, and it's like so many of these places are closed and it's kind of like, what do you even do? I've been getting out a little bit. I've been like going on some walks and I went for a run the other day, which was nice, but it feels a little bit weird that it's just like so quiet out. Like I'm like looking at the freeway right now and like I can kind of see it, and there are not that many cars on it, and it's kind of like, it feels a little bit weird, but I guess that's just like what's happening right now. I love that you brought up your team playerness. I totally agree, which is actually funny because I feel like a couple of years ago, like we were talking about something similar, and I feel like you definitely just have like, you have like a tendency to like have a good time, but also just like fuck shit up, which is like so funny because I think that like this like very honed and developed sense of team playerness that I totally agree that you have, and like I'm glad it feels good for you. Like I think that's a really I don't know if it's like maturing or what, but I think it's interesting to see some people start looking forward to like humanity, and this kind of goes back to a little bit about what you're talking about with the ants, of like a singular human versus humanity, and the robots as well. And yeah, it's really interesting that I find there's like this tension almost between like, I guess maybe it's just like a tension between optimism and pessimism about just like the outlook of humanity. I think that like an optimistic outlook means that you see there being like a big enough chance that humanity like could make it, that it's like worth acting for, but also you need to be pessimistic enough to think that we probably won't make it like the way that we are right now. And there's, I think, a very fine line that, you know, crosses over into nihilism, and like this balance of working towards a greater good that's sort of undefined but still retaining yeah, just that balance of like the optimism that yes, we could continue to survive like all of humanity, therefore like, I don't know, I'm not like, I won't get into like utilitarianism and stuff, but like a humanity over a single human, like that's worth it because we're optimistic enough about it, but we're like pessimistic enough that like the current state couldn't get us there, so we have to make these sacrifices. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's definitely like a bit of a challenge, I think, to sort of reconcile both of those things. And I think it's the same thing. I really think that life is pretty much, or a lot of life at least, is like a scale of things. And so, you know, we talked about that a lot in like high school English class, I remember, and shout out Mr. Kid. And I think that it is important to recognize that so much of life is scale. And it's, when we talk about like why babies cry, it's like when they're hungry, it's literally the worst thing they've ever felt. And scale is really interesting, I think, as we get older too, because we're exposed to a lot of different, well, things of different scales, and then a lot of different like trade-offs at different scales. I think that like I've always been somewhat in tune with like this concept of like everything has a trade-off. Obviously, I think that based in scarcity, like we're all kind of inherently aware of that, but I do think that we see different consequences at different scales maybe, and I'm like constantly recalibrating my own understanding of how different things impact other things, which is, you know, a challenge, but also I think really important as we like grow into adults that like make decisions for, I mean, our jobs, other people sometimes, like all of these things come together. Yeah, and I think that's sort of like one of these times right now where we as a group, or like as an entire world, are kind of bought into this like we all are gonna make it if we like, you know, do this together, on that note though, I was kind of wondering, everybody, or at least a lot of the like media that I've been consuming lately has been likening this to like the Spanish flu, like we've been talking about different pandemics and stuff, and I was kind of curious if you've heard about the 1957 H2N2 influenza outbreak, which I'm not at all qualified to make this assessment, but it seems slightly like more similar, and I'm kind of wondering why there hasn't been more about that. I mean, right now, as of like today, we're seeing like the stock market rally. Funny note about Zoom, I can't believe that happened over like confusing a ticker symbol. Like, ugh, I mean, at least somebody like realized they did they did something about it, but I think that's hilarious that something so like small makes such a big difference, because like it makes the stock market just seem so fake. I'm like, you're literally investing in the wrong company because of the ticker, but okay. Anyway, okay, I got off track. But yeah, we saw the stock market rally, and people are kind of seeing like this like narrative that we've been, you know, whatever, ushering along here is like becoming very positive all of a sudden, that like we've seen like maybe the peak come earlier than we thought. And I mean, I feel like literally just last week people were like, oh, we're gonna be in lockdown for like 6 more months, like all these things, it could be really bad. And it is pretty interesting to see how quickly people like latch onto the momentum of like the general sentiment. Like I think that a lot of that is led by both like President Trump's briefings, and then okay, same thing happened to me, but the optimize button, what that does is I think it stores all of your photos and stuff in iCloud, so your local storage is free to record new stuff until it uploads it. Anyway, what I was saying is both like led by like sentiment led by President Trump's briefings, as well as then like all of the discussion that follows that, like without fail, everyone sort of is like talking about it. We see big like material events are shown or are then realized in the market, like the $2.2 trillion stimulus bill, or like the jobs report, which all to take it all the way back, 6 million people, like for a total of 10 million people, jobless claims, like that. It was funny for you to say like, just, you know, multiply that and then multiply again, like no problem, right? And I think that you're totally right. Like it's just so we have a very limited bandwidth for like, I don't even know if it's like empathy, but I do think that there's like some split between this analytical understanding of 10 million people is like a big number, like that's just a lot of people, especially as a percentage of the US population or the US working population even. But there's like, I feel like emotionally stupid that I can't like internalize the empathy of like what that really means. And I think that that's probably like a safety measure, like to your point, like maybe 300 people max. Like I do think that there's something to be said for like, we probably aren't like designed to be able to feel that or comprehend that, because there was really not a practical there's not a practical reason to. Like if you deeply felt the pain of 4 million people, like do you think that you would be able to get anything done? Because I think that the depth that you can feel like understanding for one person is like, you are physically limited by how much time you can spend trying to understand someone. And like that kind of segues into this other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit more about, which is what we were talking about a little bit earlier this week, about like the loneliness of just not necessarily like the lockdown, but the loneliness of being really the only person. I mean, you're the only person that, or who's lived your life and had your experiences in the way that you have. And like the thing that prompted this for me was I binge watched Tiger King in one day on Netflix. And aside from it just being like ridiculously entertaining because it's like so crazy and like foreign to anything that I've ever experienced, like the thing that got me thinking about this idiosyncratic individual experience of life is realizing just how different their perspectives, like Joe Exotic, like their perspectives and perceptions and experiences were, like how different they are from my own. And kind of like unpacking that a little bit, I've thought a bit about who, if anyone, has like the most similar life or experience as me, and it's probably like it's got to be my sister, just from like an upbringing standpoint. And I think that what is kind of interesting is like the familial unit has a lot of these like inherently shared, I don't know, like values, perspectives, perceptions, or like ways of processing, even like ways of thinking. Like I think that that could be one reason that particularly family relationships are particularly salient. And I'm not like that, obviously families can look very different everywhere, and sometimes people like to choose their own families as like a thing. And of course I'm adopted, so the whole like nature versus nurture thing, just I'm gonna just leave it there. It'll sit there for a little bit. But back to my original point of loneliness, like I do think that it's kind of it's like the coolest thing that you're like the only one, and then it's also like, you know, with all the time in the world, we don't have the words or the capability to fully and completely share with someone and have them understand. I don't think that we necessarily need to, but it certainly feels a little bit like you know, all the cells in your body are like separate, but they work together, and that kind of seems like, you know, the human, like, I don't know, the human race is like a concept. And so I think that it's like, it's kind of cool. It sort of forces me to feel pretty, like I want to be pretty independent then, and like the people that we choose to share parts of our life with then, I did it again, but I'm gonna fix this after this. Hopefully it will stop happening. But anyway, like the people that we choose to spend parts of our life with, I think, end up being another thing that we just really have to prioritize, because I mean, we have limited time. It's back to this like time scarcity of like how much can you get to know the people. And I don't know, I think that's like kind of hard, but it's kind of yeah, I don't know if I have a word for that yet, but I'm interested in what you have to say about like this loneliness that's also like, I don't know, it sounds so dramatic, it's like lone wolfy, but it's kind of comforting sometimes, I guess. I don't know.